The first thing I heard that morning wasn't birds or traffic. It was a man screaming, "Hands up! Step away from the door." His voice cut through the Texas heat like a blade. I froze, standing barefoot on my own porch, a mug of coffee trembling in my hand. Two men in tactical vests stormed up my driveway, their boots thudding against the concrete, guns drawn, badges flashing in the sun. For a split second, I thought I was caught in some nightmare. "Ma'am, you're trespassing on restricted property," one of them barked. The words made no sense. I blinked, heart hammering. "What are you talking about? This is my house." My voice cracked somewhere between fear and disbelief. I'd just moved into this place 3 weeks ago. A quiet little corner lot I'd worked my whole life to afford. I'd painted the porch, planted flowers by the mailbox. It was supposed to be a fresh start for me and my son. But the taller man stepped closer, finger twitching near his trigger. The heat shimmered off his vest, and I could smell the sharp, metallic scent of oil and leather. My hands went up instinctively. From where I stood, something about their uniforms didn't feel right. The patches on their sleeves were mismatched. One said Community Task Division, the other Protective Enforcement. No department name, no numbers. I'd worked in emergency care long enough to know real uniforms had structure, rules, order. These men looked like they'd bought theirs online. "Ma'am, step away from the property line," the shorter one said. His tone wasn't official. It was rehearsed. Behind them, a black SUV idled, the engine rumbling. I noticed the license plate was clean, almost too clean, with no government markings. My stomach dropped. Something was off. "I don't understand," I said, voice shaking. "This is 1432 Willow Bend Drive. I bought this house. I have the deed inside." The tall one smirked. "Not anymore, you don't. This property's under HOA seizure for unpaid assessments." Before I could respond, a new voice sliced through the chaos. Smooth, controlled, but dripping with arrogance. "Gentlemen, gentlemen, no need to frighten her." I turned, and there he was. Harold Benson, the HOA president I'd met once before. Pressed khakis, aviator sunglasses, clipboard in hand like a weapon of authority. "Jessica," he said, smiling too wide, "let's not make this difficult. The association's had this house under review since the last owner's foreclosure. There are dues owed. You shouldn't even be here." I stared at him, mouth open. "Harold, that's not how this works. I bought this house directly through the county sale. The bank cleared it." He stepped forward, lowering his voice. "You may have bought it, but you didn't earn it here. And in Maple Ridge Estates, that matters." His breath smelled faintly of mint and smugness. I reached for my phone, desperate to call 911, but one of the officers shifted his stance. "Ma'am, don't move. We're handling this." "You're handling nothing," I snapped, holding up my hands. "You're not real cops." Harold raised an eyebrow, his smile curving into something almost cruel. "Careful, Jessica. You wouldn't want to resist an enforcement action." The morning air thickened around us. The smell of cut grass, the hum of cicadas, even the light felt distorted. My pulse roared in my ears. "I have my deed inside," I said again, barely more than a whisper. "It's mine." "Paperwork doesn't change the rules," Harold said softly. "This community has standards." The shorter man stepped forward, handcuffs dangling from his belt. "Ma'am," he said coldly, "you're under arrest for trespassing on HOA property." For a heartbeat, the world went silent. My breath caught in my throat as sunlight glinted off the steel cuffs. That's when I realized I wasn't just being harassed. They were actually trying to arrest me for living in my own home. "Harold, get off my property before I call real cops," I shouted, my voice trembling but trying to hold its ground. The two so-called officers stiffened, but Harold didn't even flinch. He stood there with that same lazy grin, sunglasses reflecting my front door like a mirror. "Jessica," he said smoothly, "there's no need for dramatics. These gentlemen are fully authorized by the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. They're here to handle an internal enforcement matter." "Enforcement?" I spat the word back at him. You sent fake cops to my house to threaten me? You're insane. He sighed, pretending to be patient. They're not fake. They're licensed security officers. The HOA uses them all the time. You're simply not familiar with how our community operates yet. Behind him, the two men exchanged smirks, their fingers tapping the grips of their guns. I could feel the heat radiating off the concrete porch, the air thick with the smell of asphalt and sweat. My heart was hammering so loud I could barely think straight, but I forced myself to stand tall. Listen to me carefully, I said, pointing toward the property line. I bought this house legally, through a foreclosure sale. It's mine. I have every document, every signature. Harold's grin widened. That sale doesn't mean anything in this neighborhood, Jessica. The association still has claims on unpaid dues and violations left by the previous owner. Until that balance is settled, this property isn't truly yours. I blinked, stunned by the arrogance in his tone. That's not how property law works, Harold. The debt was attached to the person, not the house. You can't just seize a home. He took a slow step toward me, lowering his voice so only I could hear. We have our own rules here. Rules that protect our community from people who don't belong. My stomach twisted. I could hear the ichukri's faint rustle of blinds from my neighbor's windows. Faces moved behind curtains, but no one opened a door. No one spoke up. They were all watching, too scared or too loyal to intervene. I took out my phone and started recording. Say that again, I told him. Tell me I don't belong here. I want it on video. His jaw tightened. Jessica, you don't want to make this harder than it needs to be. Harder? I snapped. You sent armed men to my home. You're trespassing. That's when one of the officers moved fast. He smacked my phone out of my hand so hard it spun through the air and slammed onto the concrete, the screen shattering like glass on tile. The sound made me jump. No recordings, he barked. I stumbled back, clutching my wrist where his hand had grazed me. The skin burned. You just assaulted me. You're not real law enforcement. You're criminals. Harold turned, his tone now condescending and slow, like he was explaining something to a child. Jessica, calm down. This is HOA protocol. You're in violation of multiple covenants. We're simply trying to resolve this peacefully before it goes further. Further? I echoed, my voice low and shaking. You mean before you try to throw me out of my own home? He tilted his head. If necessary, yes. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He actually thought he had that kind of power. Legal nugget, and HOA can't seize or control a property without a valid lien or a court order. What Harold was doing wasn't just intimidation. It was illegal. I bent down slowly, my knees weak, and picked up my cracked phone from the porch. The screen was spider-webbed, but when I pressed the button, the red light blinked faintly back at me. The recording hadn't stopped. Every word, every threat, every smug look. It was all there. And as Harold turned to leave with his fake enforcers, I felt the first flicker of something stronger than fear. It was anger. Real, burning, unstoppable anger. Don't you dare touch me, I screamed as one of them grabbed my wrist, twisting it backward with deliberate force. The pain shot up my arm like fire, and I yanked away, stumbling back against the doorframe. My heartbeat pounded so hard it drowned out every sound except my own breath. The taller man sneered. You're resisting. Don't make this harder on yourself. Harder? I spat, trembling. You're trespassing. Get off my porch. I swung my front door open and darted inside, slamming it shut behind me with all my weight. The lock clicked. My body shook uncontrollably. My son Ethan came halfway down the stairs clutching the railing. Mom, what's going on? Stay upstairs, I yelled, pressing my back against the door. I could still hear the men outside, boots scraping, voices muffled. She's calling the cops, one said. Get Benson. With trembling hands, I snatched my cracked phone off the floor and dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice came through, calm and professional. 911, what's your emergency? This is Jessica Monroe, I said, trying to steady my breath. There are two armed men outside my house pretending to be police officers. They say I'm trespassing on my own property. Okay, ma'am. What's your address? 1432 Willow Bend Drive. There was a pause. Then, ma'am, we don't have any units dispatched to that address today. My stomach dropped. Then who are these people? We're sending deputies now, the dispatcher said quickly. Stay inside. Do not open the door. I hung up and moved to the window, peeking through the blinds. The two officers were still there, talking to Harold, who had reappeared like a snake slithering back out of the shadows. He gestured wildly, pointing at my door, his expression smug and satisfied. When the first real patrol car turned onto my street, its siren slicing through the heavy air, the imposters stiffened. One spoke into his shoulder radio, though I noticed there was no earpiece. Within seconds, they were moving toward their SUV. The real deputies pulled up just as the fake patrol car backed away. Sheriff's Department, one of the real officers shouted, stepping out of his vehicle. But the SUV sped off, tires screeching, taillights disappearing around the corner before anyone could react. I opened my door cautiously, relief and adrenaline tangling in my chest. Thank God you're here, I said, my voice cracking. Those men, they tried to arrest me. The deputy nodded, scanning the area. You said they claimed to be officers? Yes, but they're not. I recorded part of it. I handed him my damaged phone, praying the video still worked. He played it, eyes narrowing as the footage rolled, two men in unmarked gear, one of them grabbing my wrist. Harold standing smugly nearby. After a moment, he looked up. These aren't officers. Not city, not county, not state. No unit identifiers, no badges we recognize. You did the right thing calling us. Behind him, Harold walked toward us, arms raised in feigned innocence. Deputy, this is all a misunderstanding, he said smoothly. Our private security may have overstepped, but they were simply enforcing HOA compliance. The deputy turned sharply. Private security isn't law enforcement, sir. You can't have them impersonating police. Harold's expression didn't waver. Of course not. We'll make sure it doesn't happen again. His tone was calm, but his eyes told a different story. Pure irritation at being caught. He was already plotting his next move. I could feel it. Legal nugget in Texas. Impersonating a peace officer is a felony under Penal Code paragraph 37.912. Punishable by up to 10 years in prison. The deputies took my statement and promised to review the footage further, but when I stepped outside to show them where the SUV had been parked, there was nothing, no tire tracks, no evidence they'd ever been there. It was like they'd vanished into thin air. And the worst part? It felt like they knew exactly when to disappear. As if someone had warned them the real cops were on their way. The next morning, I stepped outside with my coffee and stopped dead in my tracks. My mailbox lay crumpled at the curb, metal bent like someone had taken a bat to it. But that wasn't what made my stomach twist. It was the note taped to my front door. A single sheet of paper, ripped from a legal pad, with thick black letters scrawled across it. Move out before we move you. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The morning air felt heavy, the chirping birds drowned out by the echo of those words inside my head. I tore the note down with shaking hands, my throat dry. Someone had been on my porch again, close enough to tape this to my door, close enough to know I'd find it first thing in the morning. By the time I reached the sheriff's office, my nerves were shot. I slid the crumpled note across the desk to Deputy Alvarez, the same officer who had responded to the fake cops. He studied it quietly, then looked up. You think this has something to do with your HOA president? I don't think, I said, voice cracking. I know it does. He sighed. Without fingerprints or a witness, it's hard to prove. But I'll add it to the report. Keep your doors locked, your cameras rolling, and call us if you see anyone suspicious. On my way home, I passed Harold's white pickup parked at the HOA office. Against my better judgment, I stopped. He was out front, pretending to inspect the community bulletin board. When he saw me, that smirk returned. Morning, Jessica, he said, as if we were old friends. I held up the note. Did you have something to do with this? He chuckled. Paranoid much? Maybe you shouldn't stir up trouble if you don't like attention. That's a threat, I snapped. He shrugged. It's advice. This neighborhood values peace. And right now, you're disturbing it. Everyone's watching you. Something in the way he said watching made my skin crawl. By the time I got home, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I double-checked every lock, every window. When night fell, I sat by the living room window with the lights off, watching the street. Hours passed. The air outside was still until headlights appeared at the end of the block. They didn't move, just sat there, idling. I could see the outline of a man behind the wheel, maybe two. I called 911 again, whispering into the phone. They're back, the same SUV. By the time a patrol car arrived 20 minutes later, the vehicle was gone. The deputy searched the street, found nothing. Could be teenagers, he said, or private security doing rounds. Private security. Those words again. I knew exactly what he meant. The next morning, my neighbor Lori knocked on my door. She looked nervous, eyes darting up and down the street. Jessica, have you seen the HOA newsletter? I frowned. No, why? She handed me the folded paper. My name was printed on the front under a bold headline, Resident Under. Investigation for property fraud. I felt sick. They published this? Lori nodded. Harold's saying you falsified ownership records. People are talking. It hit me like a punch to the chest. He wasn't just trying to scare me, he was turning the whole neighborhood against me. Legal nugget HOAs can't interfere with a lawful homeowner's rights or spread false accusations. Harassment and intimidation can violate federal civil rights and fair housing laws. That night, I barely slept. The house felt smaller, every sound amplified. The creak of the floor, the hum of the fridge, the whisper of wind against the shutters. Sometime past midnight, I got up to check the window one last time. And there he was, leaning against the same black SUV from before. One of the fake cops, arms crossed, watching my house like a predator waiting for a signal. I froze, heart pounding. The streetlight flickered once, and for a moment, his face disappeared into the dark. Jessica, you didn't hear it from me, whispered Lori, my next-door neighbor, glancing nervously over her shoulder. But those men, they work for Harold's brother-in-law. Her words hit me like a jolt of electricity. We were standing between our houses, the late afternoon sun slicing through the fence slats, painting stripes across her anxious face. She was trembling, not from the breeze but from fear. What do you mean? I asked quietly, though my pulse was already racing. Lori took a deep breath. Harold's brother-in-law, Ray. He runs this so-called private security firm, Maple Ridge Security. He's been bragging about landing a contract with the HOA. Everyone thought it was just neighborhood patrol work, but... She paused, swallowing hard. Those men on your porch? They're not police. They're his guys. My stomach turned. Everything suddenly made sense. The fake badges, the unmarked SUV, the vanishing act before real deputies arrived. How do you know this? I overheard him at the clubhouse, she whispered. He was talking to Harold. Said you needed a scare to get out faster. I shouldn't even be telling you this, Jessica. He's dangerous. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight. The neighborhood around us was silent. Too perfect. Trimmed lawns, distant sprinklers, wind chimes, all hiding something rotten underneath. Thank you, I managed. Please don't say anything to anyone. Not yet. As soon as Lori slipped back inside her house, I ran to mine and opened my laptop. Maple Ridge Security. I typed the name into the state licensing database. Nothing. Not a single record. Then I tried the business registry. Again, nothing. No permits, no insurance filings, no tax ID. It didn't exist. Not legally. The realization made my hands shake on the keyboard. If they weren't licensed, every single enforcement action they took was illegal. They'd broken the law the second they set foot on my porch. Legal nugget private security firms in Texas must be licensed through the Department of Public Safety. Any operation without certification, especially one displaying law enforcement insignia, is committing a crime. I clicked deeper into the web, searching public records and social media. That's when I found something worse. Photos from a local community event tagged under the HOA's official page. In one of them, Harold stood next to a man wearing the same fake tactical vest as the imposters who'd threatened me. The caption read, "Harold Benson and Maple Ridge Security, keeping our neighborhood safe." Safe. The word made me laugh bitterly. They weren't keeping anyone safe. They were keeping everyone scared. I grabbed my phone and began photographing everything. The article, the photos, Harold's smug grin. Then I stepped outside, snapping shots of the HOA office, the sign, the clubhouse. Every detail might matter later. I even took a photo of the street where the SUV had parked that night, marking the license plate on paper in case it vanished again. For hours I documented, organized, and backed everything up to the cloud. Every time I clicked save, I felt a little more control returning, a small rebellion against the fear they'd planted in me. But just as I started to feel like I was getting ahead, something pulled my attention. Through the window across the street, a dark vehicle turned the corner. My pulse jumped. I grabbed my camera and zoomed in. Same SUV, same tinted windows. I slipped out quietly, staying low behind the hedges as the vehicle rolled past my driveway and turned right toward the edge of the neighborhood. I followed on foot, my phone camera recording. It drove another block, then another, before pulling behind an old warehouse near the service road, a building I'd never noticed before. Rusted metal siding, a flickering floodlight, and a faded sign by the gate that read, "Benson Community Protection." I stared at it, the blood pounding in my ears. Benson, Harold's last name. He wasn't just part of this scheme, he was running it. "Gotcha," I whispered, pressing my phone against the cracked window pane of the warehouse. The glass was grimy, smudged with years of dust, but it didn't matter. Through that narrow slit, I had the proof I needed. Inside, Ray Benson, Harold's brother-in-law, stood at a folding table, peeling off stacks of cash like he was paying bills. Across from him were the same two men who'd tried to arrest me on my own porch. Their fake badges glinted under the yellow warehouse light. I zoomed in, breath held. Ray handed them envelopes, laughing as he said something I couldn't quite make out over the faint hum of generators. Then I saw it, hanging on the wall behind them. Racks of black tactical uniforms lined up in neat rows, each with patches that read Police Unit and Enforcement Division. Some of the patches looked real, the kind used by local departments. Others were clearly printed knockoffs. My stomach turned. They weren't just impersonating officers. They'd built a full-scale operation to look legitimate. I panned my phone slowly, capturing everything. The cash, the uniforms, the weapons laid out on the table. Even a whiteboard that read HOA assignments with addresses scrawled underneath. One of those addresses was mine. A sharp noise behind me made me flinch. The sound of a door creaking somewhere in the shadows. My heart raced. I ducked lower, holding my breath. A beam of light swept across the floor from inside the warehouse. Thought I heard something, a man's voice muttered. I didn't wait to find out who it was. Keeping low, I slipped away from the window and sprinted around the corner of the building. My shoes crunched against gravel, each step echoing in the night. I didn't stop until I reached my car parked half a block away. Once inside, I locked the doors, started the engine, and drove off with shaking hands. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting someone to follow. The entire way home, the words ran through my head like a drumbeat. I have proof. I have proof. I have proof. When I got back, I immediately uploaded every photo and video to a secure folder online. Then I sent an email to Deputy Alvarez with everything attached. Photos of Ray, screenshots of the uniforms, timestamps, the whole lot. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I'd finally done something right. I'd hit them where it hurt. Evidence. But the victory didn't last long. That night, around midnight, I woke to the sound of air hissing outside my bedroom window. At first I thought it was sprinklers. Then came the dull rhythmic scrape. Metal against rubber. My stomach dropped. I ran to the window and pulled back the curtain. Two shadowed figures crouched near my car, one holding a knife, the other laughing quietly. The streetlight flickered just enough for me to catch a glimpse. One of them was the fake cop with the shaved head. I yelled, pounding the glass. They looked up, startled, then bolted into the darkness. By the time I made it outside, they were gone. My tires, however, were shredded, slashed clean through. 4 of them. I stood there under the flickering light, barefoot on the cold driveway, the night air thick with the stench of rubber and gasoline. It wasn't random. It was a message. We know what you're doing. I emailed the sheriff's office again, adding a short line at the end. They're retaliating. Please help. Legal nugget recording from a public vantage point, even of private property, is legal as long as you're not trespassing. It's one of the most powerful tools for exposing corruption and harassment. I sat in the dark living room until dawn, every creak of the floorboards making my heart jump. Just as the first light crept through the blinds, my phone buzzed. It was Deputy Alvarez. His voice was steady, but his words chilled me. Jessica, we need you to come in. Don't panic. We've been watching them too. You think you can destroy this community? Jessica? Harold shouted across the packed meeting hall, his voice echoing off the walls like a gavel. The room went dead silent. Every seat was filled. Neighbors, board members, even the smug faces of a few who'd once waved at me during morning walks but now looked away. The air was thick with tension and cheap coffee. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering like the mood in the room, unstable and ready to explode. I stood near the front, shaking but determined. Destroy this community? I said loudly, my voice trembling with anger. You're the one who hired fake cops to threaten homeowners. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few people turned toward Harold, their faces twisted in disbelief. Others whispered behind cupped hands. For the first time, I saw cracks forming in the wall of silence he'd built around himself. Harold straightened his blazer, the picture of arrogance. That's a serious accusation, he said. And false. My security team acted within their rights under HOA authority. Authority, I snapped. You mean the illegal company run by your brother-in-law? The one you paid cash under the table? A few heads whipped back toward him. His smirk faltered. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. Let's see what the community thinks after watching this. I tapped the screen and played the short clip I'd captured, the one where the fake cop stood on my porch, shouting orders, with Harold watching from the driveway like a king surveying his subjects. The audio filled the room. The command, "You're under arrest, ma'am," echoed loud and clear. Someone gasped. A woman in the second row whispered, "Oh my God, that's her house." Murmurs swelled into low chatter. Harold's face turned red, his jaw tightening. He lunged forward, slamming his palm on the table. "Turn that off." I didn't. I stood my ground. "No, everyone here deserves to know who's running their HOA. You think you can bully me with fines and fake police? You're done, Harold." He took a deep breath, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You've left me no choice," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "For defamation of the association and disruption of a sanctioned meeting, you're being fined $10,000. Gasps again. People started shouting, some at him, others at me. The room erupted in chaos. "This is abuse of power," someone yelled from the back. "She's right," another shouted. Harold pounded his gavel, shouting over them, "Order! Order!" But the noise only grew louder. For a second, I thought I saw fear flash across his face, not of me but of losing control, and that terrified him more than anything. In the far corner, 2 men stood quietly, plain clothes, arms crossed. They weren't residents. I recognized one of them from the sheriff's office. They watched everything, recording on small body cameras hidden in their shirts. When Harold noticed them, his voice faltered for just a moment. "Jessica," he said finally, pointing toward the door, "you're no longer welcome in HOA meetings until your balance is paid in full." I laughed bitterly. "Balance? You mean your fake lien? You're going to regret this. I turned to leave as voices continued to rise behind me. The perfect chaos he could no longer control. As I stepped outside, the crisp night air hit me like a slap. For a moment, I felt victorious. But that feeling didn't last. My car sat under the flickering streetlight, just where I'd parked it. I unlocked it, but something caught my eye. A long, jagged line scratched into the paint from the front bumper to the rear door. My heart sank. Someone had keyed my car. And tucked under the wiper blade was a folded note. I unfolded it with shaking hands. 3 words stared back at me in thick black ink. "Stop digging, Jess. That can't be right," I whispered, staring at the paper in front of me, an official-looking document stamped by the county clerk's office with Harold Benson's signature printed neatly at the bottom. The heading read, "Claim of lien. Amount due, $24,000. My name was listed under delinquent owner. The fluorescent lights in the county records office flickered as I read it again, my hands trembling. The clerk behind the counter, a gray-haired woman named Mrs. Dorsey, leaned forward and adjusted her glasses. "Ma'am, that's what's filed in the system. It was submitted by the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association 2 weeks after your purchase was recorded." 2 weeks? That meant Harold had filed it after I legally bought the house. "This has to be a mistake," I said. "I don't owe them anything. The bank cleared all previous liens when I closed." Mrs. Dorsey gave me a sympathetic look. "I'm sorry, honey, but it's definitely on record. See the signature line? Authorized by HOA President Harold E. Benson." She pointed to the ink-stamped date. "Filed and notarized right here." I felt my stomach twist. Harold hadn't just lied. He'd forged a legal document to make it seem like I was in debt to his HOA. He was building a fake paper trail to justify everything. The threats, the harassment, the seizure. "Can I get a copy of this?" I asked. Mrs. Dorsey nodded and hit the print button. "Sure can. You might want to take this straight to the sheriff's office." When I stepped out of the building, the Texas sun felt hotter than ever. The papers in my hand practically burned. I sat in my car for a long minute, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm my breathing. Then I took a photo of the document with my phone and texted it to Deputy Alvarez with one line, "You need to see this." He forged a lien. By the time I reached the sheriff's office, Alvarez and another investigator, a tall, quiet man named Detective Green, were waiting for me. I laid the papers out across the table like evidence in a courtroom. Green skimmed the top page, then the next, his brow furrowing deeper with every line. "You said this was filed after the sale?" "Yes," I said. "I closed on May 3rd. He filed that on May 17th. He nodded slowly. "And he sent you notices demanding payment, right?" I nodded again. "And used those fake officers to try and scare me out." Green tapped the page. "That's not just harassment. This is mail fraud, federal territory. Legal nugget filing or mailing a false lien is a federal crime under Title 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 1341. It carries penalties of up to 20 years in prison, especially when used to extort property or money." Hearing the words federal crime felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's nightmare. "Can you prove he signed it?" I asked. Green held up the document. "We don't have to. It's notarized. That means he verified it under oath. If the signature's real, he committed fraud. If it's fake, that's forgery. Either way, he's cooked." A cold sense of relief washed over me. Finally, something concrete. Something that couldn't be dismissed as paranoia or HOA misunderstanding. I looked between them. "So what happens now?" Green glanced at Alvarez, then leaned forward. "We've been tracking his activities for a while. This confirms what we suspected, but if we're going to nail him, we need him caught in the act." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" He slid the papers back toward me. "We're setting up a sting. You're the only one who can bait him into making his next move. He thinks you're scared. We'll use that." My hands tightened around the papers. The idea terrified me, but for the first time, I saw the path forward. Harold was about to fall into his own trap, and I was going to help spring it. "Stay calm," The deputy's voice whispered through my earpiece. "They're walking up your driveway right now." I pressed my back against the kitchen wall, trying to quiet my breathing. My heart was a drum in my chest, steady and violent. The house looked normal. Every light positioned just like I'd left it the night the fake cops first came. Curtains drawn halfway, porch light on, door unlocked just enough to tempt them. But this time, the walls had eyes. Hidden cameras dotted the corners. One behind the flower pot by the steps, another in the porch light, and two inside the living room, their tiny red lights blinking like watchful sentinels. Outside, two unmarked cruisers sat a block away, engines off, waiting. The plan was simple: let them think I was alone, scared, ready to surrender. Then the deputies would move in. Through the window, I saw the black SUV creep down the street and park in the same spot it had before. Bold, confident, like it owned the place. The men stepped out, dressed in their fake tactical gear again, the words "community enforcement" stamped across their vests. I could see Ray Benson clearly this time, his thick frame silhouetted under the streetlight. My palms were slick with sweat. I forced myself to move to the front door, pretending to look through mail, pretending to be unaware. Every second felt like a lifetime. They walked up the driveway in perfect formation, just like trained officers, two in front, one behind. The first one rapped sharply on the door. "Jessica Monroe, we're here to serve an eviction notice authorized by the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association." The words made my stomach twist, but I stayed silent. The earpiece crackled again. "Hold your ground," the deputy whispered. "We've got eyes on all three." Another knock, harder this time. "Ma'am, open up or we'll have to enter by force." Ray's voice followed, lower but commanding. "She's inside. Take the door if you need to." I flinched at the sound of splintering wood. They were actually trying to kick it open. My entire body tensed, the adrenaline hitting like lightning. Then, in one perfect moment, the night erupted. "Sheriff's Department, drop your weapons!" The roar came from every direction. Floodlights flashed from hidden vehicles. Real deputies surged forward from the dark, weapons drawn, shouting commands. The fake officers froze mid-motion, their hands flying into the air. Ray spun around, panic etched across his face. "This is a misunderstanding," he shouted, but no one listened. Within seconds, two deputies had him face down on the gravel, zip ties locking around his wrists. I stayed by the window, barely breathing, watching the entire scene unfold like something out of a movie. The shouting, the scuffle, the sheer disbelief on their faces when they realized who they were dealing with. It was justice finally taking shape right in front of me. The deputy's voice came through again. "It's over, Jessica. You did great. Stay inside until we clear the area." I stepped back from the window, my legs weak beneath me. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every ounce of fear I'd carried for weeks poured out all at once. Relief, disbelief, exhaustion. Then something caught my eye through the window. Movement across the street. Harold Benson stood outside his house, frozen like a statue, still in his pressed khakis and neatly combed hair. His face was pale, his jaw tight. For once, that smug confidence was gone. He wasn't in control anymore. One of the deputies turned and pointed directly at him. I saw the moment Harold realized the spotlight had shifted. He tried to step back, but another squad car rolled to a stop in front of his driveway, its headlights blazing. I watched as the sheriff himself stepped out, adjusting his hat. His voice carried across the street, calm, firm, final. "Harold Benson," he said loud enough for me to hear through the glass. "We need to have a word. Harold Benson, you're under arrest for conspiracy and impersonation of a law enforcement officer." The sheriff's words cut through the cool morning air like a blade. I stood at my window, unable to look away. Harold's hands twitched at his sides as two deputies approached, their uniforms crisp and real. Not the cheap imitation he'd paraded around this neighborhood for months. "This is absurd," Harold barked, his face flushed red as they turned him around. "I am the elected HOA President of Maple Ridge Estates. You have no authority here. One of the deputies calmly snapped handcuffs around his wrists. The metallic click echoed across the quiet street, final and satisfying. You're not the authority anymore, sir, the deputy said. For a moment, it was utterly still. Then came the chaos. Neighbors poured onto their lawns in disbelief, the same people who had avoided eye contact with me for weeks. Cell phones came out, recording from every angle as Harold was led down his pristine walkway toward the waiting patrol car. His wife stood on the porch, pale and trembling, clutching the doorframe. Across the street, I could hear someone whisper, "They arrested him." Within an hour, local news crews arrived, their vans clogging the cul-de-sac. Reporters leaned into microphones, narrating the downfall of the man who once bragged that nothing happens in Maple Ridge without my approval. I watched them film the sheriff's press briefing from my living room window. The words muffled but powerful. We've dismantled an organized scheme involving fraudulent liens, illegal security operations, and impersonation of law enforcement personnel. Multiple suspects are in custody, including the HOA President, Harold Benson. The sound of applause startled me. A few neighbors had gathered near the edge of the driveway, clapping as Harold was driven away. For the first time in months, I felt the heavy knot in my chest loosen. But beneath the relief, something colder stirred. Disbelief that it had taken this long for anyone to see what he was doing. Later that afternoon, I was called to the county courthouse to give a formal statement. Deputy Alvarez met me there, walking me through the marble halls that smelled faintly of dust and old paper. In a small, wood-paneled room, the district attorney introduced himself, a sharp-eyed man named Frank Dalton. "Jessica, you've done more than most people would ever dare," he said. "Your recordings, the lien documents, the footage from the sting, it's airtight. You'll be testifying before the grand jury tomorrow." I nodded, gripping the folder of evidence I'd carried like a shield. "I just want this over," I said quietly. He smiled gently. "It's almost over, but I'll warn you. Harold isn't taking a plea deal. He's insisting on representing himself." I froze. "He's what?" Dalton sighed, rubbing his temple. "He's convinced he's smarter than everyone else. He's already filed a motion claiming the HOA has sovereign jurisdiction." The words made my stomach turn. Harold wasn't just corrupt. He was delusional. When I left the courthouse, reporters swarmed the steps, cameras flashing. One of them shouted, "Jessica, do you have anything to say about Harold Benson's arrest?" I stopped for just a second, looking into the blur of microphones and lenses. "Only that no one is above the law," I said. My voice surprised even me. Strong, steady, certain. That night, I sat on my porch for the first time in months, the air finally quiet. The HOA sign at the entrance of the neighborhood had been removed, replaced by yellow police tape fluttering in the wind. The reign of Harold Benson was over, at least for now. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't finished. The next chapter, the trial, would be the real test. As the sun dipped below the rooftops, my phone buzzed with a new message from the district attorney's office. Subject: State of Texas versus Harold E. Benson. Trial date confirmed. He wasn't done fighting, and neither was I. "Do you swear to tell the truth?" the clerk asked. I nodded, though my hands trembled so badly I had to grip the edge of the witness stand to steady them. The entire courtroom was watching me. Neighbors, reporters, jurors, and at the defense table, Harold Benson himself. His once perfect hair was grayer, his tan gone, but the arrogance still lingered in the corners of his smirk. "I do," I said quietly. The prosecutor, Frank Dalton, stepped forward. "Jessica, please tell the court what happened the morning two men arrived at your home." I took a slow breath. They came pretending to be police officers. They shouted, pointed guns, tried to arrest me, on my own porch. My voice caught on the last word, the memory flashing behind my eyes. They said the HOA owned my home, that I was trespassing, and Harold Benson was standing right there watching. Gasps rippled through the audience. I could feel Harold's eyes on me, burning with silent fury. He leaned toward his microphone. "Objection, Your Honor. Emotional dramatization. The judge didn't even look up. Overruled. Sit down, Mr. Benson. The prosecutor continued. What happened after that day, Ms. Monroe? I told them everything. The smashed mailbox, the threats, the fake newsletter branding me a criminal. The night I caught them on camera at the warehouse. Every lie Harold spun to make me disappear. Each word felt like peeling off another layer of fear, exposing the raw truth underneath. When I mentioned the forged lien, Frank held up the official copy for the jury to see. This document, he said, was filed weeks after Ms. Monroe legally purchased her home. The signature on it matches Mr. Benson's exactly. The jurors leaned forward. Harold's face turned red, but he stayed silent, gripping his pen so tight it looked ready to snap. Now, Frank said, you also mentioned the role of Mr. Benson's brother-in-law, Ray? I nodded. Yes. Ray ran the fake security company. He's the one who paid the men pretending to be officers. At that cue, the prosecutor called Ray Benson to the stand. The courtroom door opened, and Ray shuffled in wearing a wrinkled suit, his eyes fixed on the floor. He looked broken, not like the man I'd filmed laughing over stacks of cash in that warehouse. The bailiff swore him in, and when Ray finally looked up, his voice cracked. Harold told me to do it, he said. He said the HOA owned her house. He said scaring her would make her leave. A stunned silence fell. The weight of his confession hung thick in the air. Across the room, Harold slammed his hand on the table. You liar, he shouted. You're the one who… The judge's gavel thundered. Enough, Mr. Benson. Another outburst and you'll be removed from your own trial. Frank turned to the jury, then to the big screen beside the bench. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the doorbell footage Ms. Monroe recorded the morning she was threatened. He pressed play. The video filled the courtroom. My trembling voice, the shouting, the fake officers, Harold's smug posture just out of focus. You could hear every word, every threat. When it ended, the room was silent. Not a whisper. Even the reporters looked frozen in disbelief. Frank faced the jury again. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was organized intimidation, funded and orchestrated by the defendant. For the first time since this nightmare began, Harold didn't look confident. His head was down, his hands clasped tightly together. The smug grin was gone. All that was left was a man caught in the glare of his own lies. The judge adjusted her glasses, her tone steady. Ms. Monroe, she said, the court recognizes the hardship you've endured throughout this case. Before we move to sentencing, would you like to make a victim impact statement? The room turned to me. My throat tightened, my mind spinning. This was my moment, my chance to finally speak, not just for myself, but for every homeowner Harold had bullied. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my ears. Yes, Your Honor, I said softly, I would. You tried to steal my home, my peace, and my safety, I told the courtroom, voice trembling but steady. But you failed. Every eye was on me. The jurors, the cameras, the people who'd once believed Harold Benson's lies. All of them sat in silence as I faced the man who had spent months trying to destroy me. Harold sat motionless at the defense table, his suit wrinkled, his expression empty. For the first time since I'd met him, he didn't look powerful. He looked small. I took a deep breath and continued, my palms damp against the witness stand. You thought fear would make me run. You thought money and fake authority would make me silent. But you underestimated how far someone will go to protect their home. You wanted to take everything from me, and you lost everything instead. A low murmur spread through the courtroom. Even the judge's gaze softened slightly before she nodded for me to sit. The prosecutor gave me a reassuring glance, then rose for closing arguments, his tone crisp and unwavering. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began, this case isn't just about property lines or HOA rules. It's about abuse of power, greed, and the violation of trust within a community. Harold Benson used his position to terrorize residents, falsify documents, and impersonate law enforcement for personal gain. He used the very system meant to protect homeowners to threaten them, and he did it with no remorse. Until today. The courtroom was still when the jury filed out. The wait felt endless, each minute stretching like an hour. I stared at the polished floor, counting my breaths, until the bailiff finally called everyone to rise. The foreman's voice was firm and clear. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, guilty. On the charge of impersonation of law enforcement, guilty. On the charge of filing false liens, guilty on all counts. Harold's head dropped. His lawyer tried to speak, but the judge raised a hand. Mr. Benson, you abused your power to intimidate and endanger others. This court sentences you to 8 years in state prison and orders full restitution to the victims, including Ms. Jessica Monroe. The gavel struck, sharp and final. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the tears on my cheeks. Relief hit me like a wave. Not just because he was going to prison, but because the nightmare was finally, truly over. Neighbors who had once avoided me now approached, whispering apologies. Lori hugged me tightly outside the courthouse, whispering, "You did it. You really did it." Weeks later, a county announcement confirmed what I'd prayed for. The Maple Ridge HOA was dissolved. A new community association formed under county supervision, free from Harold's corruption. The neighborhood started to heal. Lawns were mowed again. People smiled. The fear that once hung in the air began to fade. For the first time in months, I slept without checking the window every hour. My son laughed again in the backyard. The sound felt like music, something I hadn't heard in far too long. Still, I couldn't forget what happened. Some scars don't fade, they remind you what you survived. I learned more than I ever wanted to about power, fear, and the law. Final legal nugget: always verify credentials. Real law enforcement will never enforce HOA rules, collect dues, or evict homeowners. If someone claims authority, ask for their department name and badge number, and confirm it directly with local police. As the credits of this story rolled in my mind, I stood on my porch one evening, watching the sunset spill gold across my street. The peace I'd fought for finally felt real. And if Harold Benson taught me anything, it's that silence feeds corruption, but truth can destroy it. What would you do if fake cops tried to arrest you in your own home? Tell your story, and hit like and subscribe if you'd fight back. Next time, the HOA that bulldozed a veteran's fence in broad daylight, and the war that followed.